हामी आजको यो प्रोग्राम सुरु गर्न गइरहेको छौँ। सर्वप्रथम त आज नियोगको यो अति व्यस्त समयमा पनि विशेष गरिकन हाम्रो पुस्ताङका युथ भाइ बहिनीहरू जुन समय दिनुभयो त्यसको लागि यहाँ सबैलाई धन्यवाद दिन चाहन्छु। र यसै गरेर मुस्ताङ किदुका फर्मर उपो प्रेसिडेन्ट छ्यापुद्रजी गुरुङज्यूलाई पनि धेरै धेरै धन्यवाद। र आजको यो प्रोग्राम खास गरिकन अलिक भव्य रूपले अलि राम्रै तरिकाले सहभागी होस् भन्ने हामीले चाहेको थियो, तर विभिन्न प्रोग्रामले नियोगमा जोगदान गरेको हुनाले अलिकति पार्टिसिपेन्ट हामीले सोचे जस्तो हुन नसके तापनि थोरैबाटै राम्रो इफेक्टिभ भयो भने यसैबाट नै हामी प्रोड्युस गर्न सक्छौँ। र यो कार्यक्रम खास गरिकन हाम्रो मुस्ताङका युथहरूबाट यस्तो किसिमको एउटा प्रोग्राम दर्जिँदै आउनु भएको छ र यो एउटा अर्गनाइज गरिदिनु पऱ्यो, एउटा प्लेटफर्म बनाइदिनु पऱ्यो भन्ने जुन एउटा कमिट आएको हुनाले हामीले यो आजको होस्ट मुस्ताङ किदुको तर्फबाट गरेको छौँ। र आजको यो प्रोग्रामले खास गरिकन अब विशेष गरेर युथलाई नै यो फोकस हुन्छ, किनभने एजुकेसन फर फ्रिडम भनेको हुनाले। र यस विषयमा दर्जिदाले जुन किसिमको हामीलाई एउटा जुन प्रेजेन्टेसन दिनुहुन्छ त्यसले हाम्रो सम्पूर्ण युथहरूलाई एउटा एजुकेसन सम्बन्धी विशेष एउटा जुन एवारनेस हुनेछ भन्ने मैले आशा लिएको छु। र विशेष गरिकन हाम्रो दोर्जे गुरुङ दाइले जुन किसिमको हामीलाई समय दिनुभयो, जुन तपाईँले हामीलाई एउटा जुन प्रेजेन्टेसन दिनुहुन्छ त्यो भविष्यमा पक्कै पनि यो नियोगमा युथहरूले त्यसलाई चाहिँ पछि आएर चाहिँ अरूलाई पनि यसको चाहिँ पक्कै पनि एउटा ज्ञान मिल्नेछ भन्ने दुई शब्द यहाँ राख्दै यो कार्यक्रममा विशेष आज चाहिँ सहयोग गर्नुहुने हाम्रो मुस्ताङ किदुका जनरल सेक्रेटरी दाउदरजी गुरुङ र हाम्रो युथका वीरेन्द्र ताङ्बुजीलाई पनि म धेरै धेरै धन्यवाद दिन चाहन्छु। र यसरी नै यो कार्यक्रममा हामी आज अगाडि जान्छौँ। धन्यवाद।
Yeah. Before I start, I'd like to thank Raj and Birendra for organizing this. Right. Might as well just get into it, right? The particular set of circumstances and context I was born into in Nepal meant that my destiny was predetermined. However, I learned very early on in my life that education could be my ticket out of that. That education, both formal and informal, would provide me freedom from the limitations and constraints imposed on my life by the context of my birth. That freedom to live a life different from that which I was destined for in Nepal. That freedom to travel and to see the world. That freedom to think differently from the way I would have learned to think based on cultural conditioning in Nepal. That freedom to behave differently, etc., all came because of, firstly, education, and secondly, humanity. The pursuit of education took me from my small town, little town of Pokhara to 4 other countries. Education took me on a 15+ years of professional international teaching career spanning 10 different countries in 5 different continents. Education took me on travels in another 36 countries. And back to Nepal in 2013 after spending pretty much all of my adult life abroad. This presentation is all about my life spent in pursuit of education, in pursuit of my dreams, about why I returned to Nepal after all those years to do the work that I do, and finally, what you can do. I was about to say, for those of you who don't know, all of you know, this is Nepal. And there are some of you who don't know where I'm from, I think. I'm from that little area within the blue circle, Mustang, where most of you are from, and from the little village of Tangbei within that little blue circle. And for those of you who don't know, Mustang, like the rest of the Tibetan plateau, is desolate and barren, highland desert. All right? Being born in a part of Nepal that is geographically and culturally Tibet. I am Tibeto-Nepalese, or as we say, Amar Nepalima, I'm a Bhote, considered a low caste in the Hindu caste system. And also born into a poor family meant that I was not expected to make much of my life. I wasn't even expected to go to school. My family lived in the beautiful city of Pokhara. Lacking in any history of education themselves, my parents wanted me to learn to, quote, read and write. They got me started at a small school in the city. However, with movement of residents, I moved schools. The third government school, Bal Jyoti, I ended up at, had next to nothing in terms of resources or funding. But at least I was in school. A teacher at this school probably made the biggest difference in my life. He was responsible for starting me on this incredible journey of further education, which gave me the freedom to explore and discover the world and humanity. Recognizing my abilities, this teacher took my dad aside and told him, and I quote, "Your son has potential, but if you leave him here, nothing will become of that. Take him to Kathmandu and put him in a good school." Heeding his advice, my dad took me to Kathmandu. And to make a long story short, I ended up at St. Xavier's Godavari School, one of the top schools at the time, if not the top primary school in the country. At St. Xavier's, I was encouraged and inspired by North American teachers. My 5th grade teacher, Father Downing from Cincinnati, Ohio, was one of them. One of the things he did was bring former students to our class to talk to us about their lives, many of them either graduates of or students at colleges and universities in the US. As a result, as a 12-year-old 5th grader, I dreamt of coming to the US for further studies and ultimately of returning home to help children from backgrounds similar to mine. I realized then that education was the ticket out of the social context I was born into in Nepal. That an advanced degree from a university in the US would earn me the respect and allow me to live, earn me respect and allow me to live a life of dignity instead of that which I was destined for in Nepal as a result of being born a Bhote. In addition to inspiring me to dream of having an academic career in the US, my North American teachers also inspired me to dream of other countries, of other cultures, other ways of living, and of other ways of being, other ways that I read about in novels. They drove me to imagine a world and life different from that in Nepal. Mr. Beeston, a Canadian teacher, describing how winter in Kathmandu is different from his hometown in Canada, said something I still haven't forgotten. In winter, in Winnipeg, when you look out the window, all you see is white everywhere. Growing up surrounded by hills, green hills, and mountains, far off to the distance, I was intrigued. Determined to break out of the Nepalese cultural and societal constraints and limitations imposed on me as a result of the accident of birth as a Bhote. To free myself from all of the connotations that the label carried, the label of Bhote carried, I applied myself. I applied myself very, very diligently to my education. I refused to believe the Nepalese society's constant reinforcement of its belief that I would amount to nothing, regardless of the efforts I put into anything that I did. I stubbornly stayed in school, reading voraciously, keeping a very good academic record, keeping an incredible attendance record, not missing a single day of school in 6 of the 10 years I attended St. Xavier's. Then the first opportunity to break free from the constraints of Nepalese culture and society came when, in 1988, I received a full scholarship to the United World College of the Adriatic in Italy. The world opened. There, I was one of 200 students from over 65 different countries. There, instead of being looked down upon, as I had been in Nepal, I was made to feel special by many people. Every single school break, for instance, my friends would invite me to their homes since I couldn't afford to fly home or to go on vacation elsewhere. Not only that, over winter break, the family would give me Christmas presents, just as they did their own children. One family gave me a Sony Walkman. Now, who here knows what a Sony Walkman is? Do you know what a Walkman is?
Yeah, I do.
You do? Okay. All right, some of you do. Okay. That was the precursor to your MP3 players. And an Italian family not only bought presents for me, they also bought a gift for me to give to a very good friend of mine on her birthday. During those 2 years, I was on the receiving end of incredible generosities and kindness. Also during those 2 years, I met and befriended students like myself from all over the world, shrinking my world. During those 2 years, learning about my international friends and their cultures, I also discovered a great deal about my own Nepalese culture, and about my own self. The experience was to be the beginning of a lifelong quest to learn about everything, which contributed a great deal to the evolution of my own self. Evolution of who, what, and how I saw myself and the world. And the experience also put me on a path of personal transformation. Towards the end of my UWC experience, I realized my dream of coming to the US and ended up at Grinnell College. At Grinnell again, I met some amazing people, and I was on the receiving end of a great deal of kindness and generosity. Graduating from Grinnell, I became the first person from my village of Tangbe, and maybe even the whole of Upper Mustang, to get tertiary qualification from an educational institution in the West. Approaching graduation, I knew what I wanted to do, and it wasn't to return to Nepal. Not immediately, anyway. The spring of '94, my last semester at Grinnell, one late afternoon, watching the late afternoon sky turning different hues every several seconds. My friend Aubrey had asked, and quote, "So, what do you want to do?" I told her, and I quote, "I want to go see the world." That freedom to dream of traveling and seeing the world came with my educational opportunities. And sure enough, it happened. As luck would have it, my former chemistry teacher at the United World College of the Adriatic invited me back to teach at the college. I jumped at the opportunity, and between 1994 and 2013, pursued a fantastic international teaching career. A teaching career of traveling and exploring the world. By the time I quit teaching, I had worked in 10 different countries and had traveled to about 36 more, and my network of friends spanned the whole globe. In the 25 years between 1988 and 2013, I'd moved residence 27 times in 14 different cities around the world. I'd shared accommodation with people from a dozen different countries, namely Pakistan, Peru, United States, Hong Kong, Australia, United Kingdom, Chile, Japan, Norway, Belgium, Thailand, and Italy. I'd studied, worked with, and taught some amazing people from all over the world. And I saw and did things that I'd never imagined doing growing up in Nepal. And in the process, learned a great deal about this incredible world and its people. I'd trekked to an altitude as high as 5,500 meters in Nepal, and scuba dived to a depth of 31 meters in the Philippines. I had swum with wild dolphins off the coast of Zanzibar. I had skied in the Swiss Alps, in Taos in New Mexico, here in the US, in Godavari, Georgia, the country of Georgia, that is, not the state of Georgia. I had snow camped in Norway, hiked in the Dolomites in Italy. I'd gone hot air ballooning in Australia, and had gone on wildlife safaris in Nepal, in Zambia, and the awesome Ngorongoro crater and the incomparable Serengeti plains in Tanzania. I'd learned to play the didgeridoo, ultimate frisbee, and to dance salsa and merengue. The freedom to do and experience the things that I have done, the freedom to go see the places and people I've gone to see, the freedom to be with the people that I've been with, all came about as a result of my pursuit and consequence of education. All the while, as I was exploring and learning about the world at large, I'd been planning to return home, to fulfill my original dream, to contribute to the education of the next generation of Nepalese children from low socioeconomic background. The only question had always been, when? Since leaving for the first time in 1988, I'd been visiting Nepal almost once every year. So while I was traveling and learning about the world and about myself, while at the same time I was doing everything I felt I needed to do in order to maintain my connections and ties to where I came from, returning home every year, I partly lost and rediscovered who, what, and how I am. I began thinking about and viewing things, events, and the world in ways the young Dorje at St. Xavier's had never imagined. had never imagined he could, or he possibly would, all of which transformed me into the person that I am today. One of the most important transformation was that of thinking of myself as a human being first, and then everything else. All aspects of my identity, ethnicity, nationality, coming next. Countries, for the same reason, represent more faces, names, personal stories, which are also connected to my own life. They are no longer the political and geographical entities they used to represent. The other result of my incredible international education and travel was drawing certain conclusions about life and the world we live in, we all live in. Here's one of the first ones. Can everyone see what's up there? Or do you want me to read it out loud? Read it? You can't see? If you can't see, what? All right, here it is. There is no such thing as the meaning of life. You make life meaningful by the way you live. I'm loath to read what I project because I'm a teacher, and that's something you don't do as a teacher. Anyway, since you can't read, yeah. Right, moving on. At the core of that is the confirmation I felt I got for my belief in compassion, a Buddhist belief, and living by its dictates. What I also came to realize, having experienced and seen poverty all over the world, everywhere I lived and traveled, is this. Those that do the most grueling of work to make a living have the hardest time actually making a living. I met this porter on a trek to Tangbe, my village, way back in the spring of 2000. The man's load was so heavy that he took maybe a step every 2 seconds. But because he was so poor and was paid so little, he carried his own food and cooking utensils to save as much as he could. The poorest and a significant percentage of the hardest working people everywhere, especially in countries like ours, country like Nepal, have the hardest time even putting a meal, a decent single meal a day on the table for themselves and their children. And yet, these very people, the weakest and the most vulnerable, the poor, the marginalized, and their children, are often treated the worst. I, however, have believed the following for a long time. The worth of a person or a people is not in their nationality, religion, skin color, class, caste, nor in the size of their house, nor in how superior they think or feel they are. Their worth is in the way they treat the weakest and the most vulnerable in their midst. Some of the weakest and the most vulnerable in Nepal are children of poor and marginalized families, especially girls. So, in March 2013, I'd finally decided to return home for good to help such vulnerable Nepalese children. Except I would take a detour. On May 1st, I was thrown in jail for allegedly insulting Islam. However, following a worldwide free Dorje Gurung campaign, I was released. I returned home on May 13 after spending 12 days in jail. While the reason for my incarceration, once again, had been the circumstances of my birth, being born a Nepalese, my freedom came as a result of humanity coming together. My freedom came from friends and friends of friends coming together to raise a voice against the injustice that had visited me. Had I not pursued education as fervently as I had I not ventured out of Nepal looking for a different life, to experience a different life, to change the way that I thought and lived, and to change the way that I behaved, I would not have made the friends that I have made, and certainly I would not have had my freedom from the Qatari jail. I know that because I met other Nepalese in jail who had been stuck inside in limbo because they had no one outside to help them. What's more, hundreds of thousands of others everywhere, in many of the countries I've lived and traveled, suffer similar and other injustices all the time, and worse. In Nepal, families of migrant laborers, poor families and their children, etc., children such as these, etc., suffer from such injustices regularly as a result of either poverty and or birth. So, with this freedom I've had, and the freedom that I continue to enjoy because of my education, since returning home on May 13, 2013, I've been doing what I can to provide that same freedom to those shackled by our Nepalese society. I'm doing everything I can through Committed, the organization I run with my buddy Jaijeev Hada. And at times, I'm also doing what I can independently. Committed helps government and community schools where vulnerable children from low socioeconomic backgrounds attend. Schools similar to the ones that I started my own academic career at in Pokhara. The following video provides a glimpse into Raithani School in Thangpalkot, one of the schools we help in the village. Though it was made in June 2013, to woo potential donors to my fundraising drive, it gives you an idea for the school.
I want to be a policeman.
I want to be an engineer.
I want to be a doctor. I want to be a nurse. I want to be a teacher. I want to.
We're here in Sindhapalchok at the school that you're supporting. You've just heard the dreams and aspirations of the students. But there's a huge gap between their dreams and reality. The reality is that the school doesn't have enough classrooms. For instance, this particular classroom, they have had to put 2 different classes together. And right now, there are over 50 students in here. The other issue, the other challenge here is the quality of teaching. Although the teachers themselves are highly committed, they lack experience and they lack training to help the students realize their dreams. I'm incredibly grateful for the support that you provided me thus far. I need one final push to get us past the tipping point, to help the children of Sindhapalchok achieve their dreams. Committed helps schools like Raitane with different projects, assisting them with acquisition of resources and helping them build infrastructure. The most important project, however, is that of setting up a fishery, what we call a social business for education, to firstly generate income for the school so that it's self-sustainable, and secondly, to make formal education a hands-on experience for the students by integrating this agricultural project with the curriculum. That brings me to why I do all that back in Nepal. I do them for two reasons. Firstly, to ensure that those children, through as practical and high quality an education as possible, realize their dreams and get to experience the freedom to chart their own destinies, even if on a small scale, just as I have been able to do. And secondly, and more importantly, to ensure that they do not experience the suffering, the pain, and the injustices that I have experienced. Having now come to a point where the way I think and behave has been incredibly influenced by the freedom that I've had to explore the world and all the various ways different people in different countries and cultures think and behave, I would like to believe that I have moved beyond thinking of Nepal and Nepalese people in terms of their jat or caste or their political or religious affiliations, etc. One of the main reasons we in Nepal are suffering from underdevelopment is, firstly, the politicization of pretty much every single system. You name it, education, medical system, judicial system, the economic system, etc. Every single one of them is politicized. Secondly, the second reason is corruption, which of course is related to politics. And the third reason is lack of education. My belief is that if we educate our population, then the freedom to think independently, the freedom to think for oneself will naturally enable them to rise above what we call in Nepal jat-pat and petty party politics, to put ourselves and our societies and country on the path to social and economic development by addressing the injustices inherent in our systems. When I was jailed in Qatar and the Free Dorje Gurung campaign was launched, the people who supported me, the people who supported the campaign, weren't all friends of mine. They weren't. The Change.org campaign alone got over 14,000 supporters. I don't have 14,000 friends. I don't think I even have 2,000 friends, let alone 14,000. What's more, support came from people all over the world, including Nepalese, both in Nepal and abroad. Most of them supported the campaign, not because of my jat, or caste, or nationality, or ethnicity, or the religion that I follow. They supported the campaign because my incarceration was unjust. I don't subscribe to any political or religious or ethnic or social group. I fight injustices both at home and abroad because through education, I have also earned that freedom to choose to fight for the freedom of others, also through education. The reason being that I consider myself, the reason is because I consider myself to be a human being first, something I alluded to earlier. I hope with education and time in the United States of America, your education, both formal in your cases and informal in the case of every single one of us here, I hope you're also able to do the same. Thank you. Question?